They were disposing of her, not for cash, but for something far more insulting: convenience. Adana Okoro sat opposite Zena, her spine as rigid as the marble columns flanking the veranda. A smile was drawn across her face, a perfect blood-red slash that failed to warm her eyes. Those eyes were busy doing what they always did, calculating. "We have wonderful news," the matriarch announced. The air, thick with the scent of jasmine, suddenly felt heavy with impending doom. Chief Emeka Okoro, Zena's adoptive father, stood by the railing with his back to them. He stared out at the flawlessly manicured lawn, a man trying to impersonate a statue, pretending he wasn't part of the verdict. "A match has been made for you," his wife continued, her voice as smooth as polished stone. "A fine young man, very stable, exceptionally hard-working." Zena remained still. Her hands were clenched in her lap, her knuckles showing white. She had been summoned from a room 10 minutes ago, pulled away from a technical drawing she was completing for her internship. That diagram, with its clean lines and predictable angles, felt like a relic from a different world. "His name is Ife," Adana offered, as if presenting a priceless jewel. "He operates his own business. Solar panel installation. A very practical field." The word hung in the air. Practical. It was the term they reserved for things they considered beneath them. The chief finally turned around. His face was a mask of strained paternal affection. "This is a good thing, Zena. A man with a trade will provide for you. It's a solid foundation for your life." The young woman's gaze flickered from his expression to the heavy, gold-plated cufflinks on his shirt. He was fiddling with one, twisting it back and forth, back and forth. It was the only part of him telling the truth. "You've arranged my marriage?" Her voice was quiet, dangerously steady. "We have secured your future," her adoptive mother corrected instantly. "You are 23. It is time. You cannot remain an intern at that little firm indefinitely." Zena looked from the woman to the man. They were a team, co-conspirators. Adopted at 8 as a public relations stunt for a failed political campaign, she had spent 15 years as a beautiful, well-behaved ornament. Now the decoration was being moved to a much smaller, less visible shelf. "I see," Zena murmured, and she did. She recognized the new cracks in the mansion's facade, the frantic phone calls her father took at night. The way Adana's smile had become tighter in recent months. They weren't ensuring her future. They were liquidating an asset. "He will be here shortly to meet you," the matriarch declared, rising. "Wear the blue dress. And please try to look happy." The meeting occurred in the smaller, less used formal sitting room, the one for guests not important enough for the grand hall. Effa was contained. He perched on the edge of a brocade armchair that was likely worth more than his entire business. He wore simple trousers and a clean but clearly old button-down shirt. The man didn't seem nervous, just observant, watching Zena with an unnerving stillness. Her father did all the talking, his voice booming with false cheer. He spoke of Ife's character, his strong work ethic, the bright promise of renewable energy. The visitor just nodded along, his eyes never leaving Zena's face. She focused on the details. His hands were clean, his nails impeccably trimmed. Too neat for someone who supposedly worked with tools. And there was a scent, faint but distinct. Not a cheap cologne, but something woody and expensive like oud. A fragrance that didn't belong in this story. "I am honored to meet you," Ife said, his voice surprisingly deep. He spoke directly to her, ignoring the chief's blustering. Zena met his gaze. "And I you." The falsehood tasted like ash in her mouth. The choice was not a choice at all. It was a current pulling her out to sea. She could fight it and drown in this house, or she could let it carry her away to an unknown shore. At least that shore would be hers. "I accept," she announced later that evening, standing before the chief and Adana in the main hall. Relief washed over her father's face so visibly it was almost pathetic. His wife simply gave a curt, satisfied nod. Business concluded. Zena turned and walked up the grand staircase without a backward glance. She could feel their eyes on her, the weight of their relief. In her room, she opened her laptop and deleted the architectural drawing she had been working on. That dream belonged to a different person. She packed a single small suitcase with the blue dress, a few practical outfits, her textbooks, a roll of drafting paper, and her favorite set of technical pencils. The rest, the designer clothes, the jewelry, the life she had performed, she left behind. It was never truly hers to begin with. As she zipped the bag, a wave of noise drifted up from downstairs. Laughter, loud music. Neka, her adoptive sister, was hosting one of her influencer parties. The bass vibrated through the floorboards. A house of celebration. A house of endings. The wedding, a week later, was a cold, swift transaction at the city registry office. No guests, save for 2 required witnesses provided by the state. Adana had cited modesty and privacy. Xena knew it was to avoid the shame of marrying their adopted daughter to a nobody. After Aoife drove her to their new home in a clean, nondescript sedan that didn't fit the poor laborer narrative. It smelled new. They traveled away from the opulent avenues of the island, crossing the bridge into the sprawling heart of the mainland. The air shifted. The buildings grew closer. The sounds intensified. He took them to a waterfront community called the Isil Echo Quarters, a maze of low-rise apartment blocks and winding streets smelling of salt and fried fish. The apartment was a 3rd-floor walk-up. It was small but spotlessly clean. 1 bedroom, a tiny kitchen, and a living area with a large window that looked out over a tangle of rooftops. It was the smallest space Xena had ever inhabited. She felt a strange, unfamiliar sense of calm. No expectations here. No performances. It's not much, Eve stated from the doorway, watching her take it all in. It's fine, she replied, placing her single suitcase on the floor. It looked comically small. That first night, they moved around each other like polite strangers. Xena unpacked her few belongings. He made them tea. He was a man of startling contradictions. While she was wiping down the counter, a cockroach skittered out. Before she could react, Eve's hand shot out and snatched it from the air with pure predatory speed. He disposed of it without a word, his expression unreadable. Later, as Xena lay awake staring at the unfamiliar ceiling, she heard him on the phone in the other room. His voice was a low murmur, but the cadence was unmistakable. It was fluent. Perfect. It was flawless Parisian French. The day settled into a quiet, peculiar rhythm. F would leave early for his supposed installation jobs and return late, his hands artfully smudged with grease that never seemed to stain his cuticles. Xena found a surprising freedom in their new anonymity. No one here knew she was an Okoro. She could walk to the market, haggle over tomatoes, and feel the sun on her face without the weight of a family name. She began to remake their small apartment, sketching a new layout on the back of an old calendar to maximize space and light. She bought cheap fabric and sewed new curtains. She found discarded wooden crates and with a borrowed hammer and nails built an elegant shelving unit. Kalo, watching as Ife, observed this transformation with a quiet intensity. This was not the behavior of a pampered princess. This was a survivor, an artist. His mission was to uncover a corporate spy. This marriage was a tool. But the woman building a home around him was becoming a dangerous, distracting variable. One evening, the gas on the stove sputtered and died while Xena was cooking stew. "The cylinder is finished," she called out to Eve, who was reading in the living area. "I'll go get a refill," he offered, coming into the kitchen. "No need," she said, already pulling a small toolkit from under the sink. "The connection is just loose." Before he could protest, she had disconnected the line, expertly tightened the valve, and reconnected it. The blue flame roared back to life. She wiped her hands on a rag, her movements precise and confident. Kalo stared. In his world, women had people for such things. He was impressed and unnerved. Her competence was a constant surprise, but the cracks in his own performance were showing. A few days later, while discussing their meager budget, Xena pointed a pencil at a column of figures. "If we want anything left over this month," she explained, "we need to lower food costs without compromising our amortization schedule for the generator." She looked up. He had frozen. Amortization. It was a banker's word, an analyst's term. It was not in the vocabulary of a man who installed solar panels. He recovered, a faint flush creeping up his neck. My old boss used to say that," he stammered. "A fancy word for paying things off." He produced a short, sharp laugh that held no humor. Xena didn't smile. She held his gaze for a long moment before looking back at the paper, tapping her pencil. The lie was clumsy. The biggest slip came during a thunderstorm. A sudden, violent clap of thunder shook the building, making a pot slip from Xena's hand. It clattered into the sink, a shard slicing her palm. Blood welled up, bright red against her skin. Efe was across the room in a heartbeat, his demeanor transformed. The quiet laborer was gone, replaced by a man of sharp, absolute authority. "Get the med kit, Stat," he commanded, his voice a low, urgent bark aimed at the empty air. He grabbed her hand to inspect the wound, then blinked as if waking from a dream. He looked around the empty apartment at Zena's shocked face. The command had been instinct. "Sorry," he mumbled, his Effa persona rebooting with a visible effort. "I meant we should find the first aid box." He cleaned and dressed the cut with a terrifying efficiency. Zena sat in silence, watching him. The French, the vocabulary, the phantom assistant, they were data points. And the data was pointing to a conclusion she couldn't yet grasp. Her suspicion started small, and it started wrong. He was hiding something, that was clear. Her mind, shaped by betrayal, leaped to the most obvious answer. Another woman, a wealthier woman. The thought took root, a bitter seed. Her search began while he was out. She felt a pang of guilt but pushed it down. She would not be a fool again. In the pocket of a jacket he rarely wore, she found it. Not a letter or a photograph, a receipt. A crisp, folded receipt from Le Ciel, one of the most exclusive restaurants in the city. The date was from 3 weeks ago, before their wedding. The total was obscene. It was for a table of 2. Zena's breath caught. The proof. He was a liar with a secret life, a secret source of money, and a secret partner. The pain was sharp and familiar. The feeling of being the convenient option, the collateral damage. That night dinner was a suffocating affair. "Is everything all right?" he asked, his voice cautious. Zena looked at him across the table. He looked so unassuming. It was all a masterful performance. "Where were you?" she asked, her voice low and even. "On the evening of the 3rd of October. Kalo's mind went into overdrive. The 3rd of October, the night he had finalized the infiltration plan with his security head. The dinner at Le Ciel. He looked at the raw hurt in her eyes. He realized she wasn't asking as an investigator. She was asking as a wife. "I was at a meeting," he said carefully. "For work." "A meeting," she repeated, her voice dripping with disbelief. "At Le Ciel?" She threw the receipt onto the table. It landed between their plates, a small white rectangle of condemnation. Kalo looked at the paper, then back at her face. He saw the conclusion she had drawn. The affair. He had planned for every security threat, every possible leak, but he had never planned for this. He had never planned for Zena, and he had no idea how to tell her the truth was infinitely more dangerous than the lie she believed. The confrontation left a deep fracture in their fragile peace. Kalo offered a partial truth, a carefully constructed lie about a wealthy investor and a potential private contract. "I didn't tell you because I didn't want to get your hopes up," he said, his voice earnest. It was a long shot. Zena didn't believe him for a second. The story was too neat, but she pretended to, nodding and retreating into a cold, polite silence that was more unnerving than any argument. The trust, what little there had been, was gone. Her hurt curdled into something else, a cold, methodical anger. She was an Okoro, trained for 15 years to recognize lies. She would not be played for a fool. Her mission changed. It was no longer about uncovering an affair. It was about uncovering the entire truth. The architect in her took over, pushing the emotional wife aside. It was time to gather data. The opportunity came 2 days later when Effie announced a multi-day installation job across the city. He packed a small duffel bag, gave her a hesitant goodbye, and left. The moment the door clicked shut, Zena went to work. She started with the duffel bag's twin, the one he used for his daily work. Inside were the usual props: greasy gloves, a multimeter, a coil of wire, a carefully curated stage set. But Zena's training had taught her to look for hidden spaces. Her fingers traced the bag's thick lining. Near the bottom, her knuckles brushed against a hard seam. She pulled and pressed. Nothing. Running her fingers along the ridge again, her nail snagged on a tiny, almost invisible thread. She pulled it. A section of the bag's floor came loose with the soft tear of Velcro. A false bottom. Zena reached inside. Her fingers closed around objects that felt cold and metallic. She pulled them out and laid them on the floor. First, a sleek matte black satellite phone. Second, a velvet pouch containing a half-dozen international SIM cards. And last, a tightly rolled tube of paper. She took a deep breath, her hands surprisingly steady. She unrolled the paper. It was not a love letter. It was a set of highly detailed architectural blueprints. Zena's world tilted. She knelt, her professional gaze scanning the drawings. The familiar lines and symbols were a language she understood perfectly. The title block in the bottom right corner made her breath catch. Project Eris. Geothermal power plant. Client, Solara Innovations. Confidential. Solara Innovations, Kylo Mbadu's company, the visionary tech billionaire. The blueprints for his most controversial project were in her husband's work bag. Her husband, the humble installer. The data points collided, forming a new terrifying structure. The French, the amortization comment, the CEO-like command, the dinner at Lucille. Ife wasn't his name, it was his cover. This wasn't about infidelity. This was corporate espionage. Her mind raced. Why the disguise? Why marry her? Her family, her father's frantic phone calls, his desperate need for money, his urgency to get her out of the house. He was compromised. Her father was the leak. A wave of nausea hit her. She was a pawn, a chess piece moved into position to give this man, this spy, proximity to his target. Her escape from the Okaros was a lie built on top of an even bigger lie. She had fled one cage only to walk into a far more dangerous one. For a moment, she felt a paralyzing helplessness. She was caught between a ruthless billionaire and her own treacherous family, a girl with a half-finished degree against forces that could crush her. Then the feeling passed, replaced by a surge of pure, cold fury. They had all underestimated her. Her father, Adana, and this man, Kelo Mbadu, who thought he could use her as a tool. They saw a quiet, compliant girl. They didn't see the architect. They didn't see the mind that could build a complete structure from scattered, nonsensical pieces. She stood up. She carefully rolled the blueprints, placed them with the phone and SIMs back into the hidden compartment, and sealed the false bottom. The bag looked exactly as it had before. Xena walked to the window and looked out at the city. The Okoros had tried to throw her away. Kelo Mbadu had tried to use her as a key. They were about to discover their grave miscalculation. She was not the key. She was the goddamn architect. And she was about to redesign this entire operation. He returned the next afternoon looking tired. The Eve disguise seemed heavier than usual. He dropped his duffel bag by the door, offering Xena a small, hesitant smile. Long couple of days, he ventured. She didn't return the gesture. She was at their small dining table, a cup of untouched tea before her. The blueprints were not on the table. They were locked in her mind. "We need to talk," she said, her voice flat. This wasn't the hurt he expected. This was colder. Kylo felt a prickle of unease. He had prepared for tears, for accusations. He was not prepared for this unnerving calm. He pulled out a chair and sat. All right. His posture shifted, becoming less Eve, more Kylo. Xena looked at him, her gaze analytical. "Your geothermal project," she began. "The Ares plant. The turbine design is revolutionary, but your primary coolant system has a single point of failure, the intake manifold. It's a bottleneck." He froze, his mind blank. A technical critique of his most confidential project was the last thing he expected. No one outside his lead engineering team should have known that. No one. If a competitor found out, she continued, her eyes locked on his, they could file a regulatory challenge that would tie you up for years. They could even sabotage it. A small targeted disruption would cascade through the entire system. The blood drained from his face. She knew, not just suspected, knew. The Eve persona evaporated. The man before her now was the CEO of Solara Innovations, and he had just been checkmated. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice a low, dangerous whisper. She leaned forward. "The question is, who are you, and why did you marry the daughter of the man you're investigating?" The pretense shattered. He stared, his mind racing. His cover was blown. The mission was compromised. "The bag," he stated, realization dawning. "A rather obvious false bottom," she replied with a hint of professional disdain. But the blueprints were what really cleared things up. He couldn't speak. He was the master strategist who had been completely outmaneuvered. "My father," Xena said, her voice dropping. "He's the leak, isn't he?" Kalo finally found his voice. "There was no point in denying it." "Yes, and you married me for access, to monitor him." "It was a strategic decision," he admitted, the words tasting like poison. A single harsh laugh escaped her lips. "A strategic decision? You destroyed my life as a business move." "That was not my intention," he insisted, leaning forward. "Xena, you have to understand." "I understand perfectly," she cut him off, her voice like ice. "I understand my adoptive father sold me to save his failing company. I understand his wife packaged the deal. And I understand my husband bought me to protect his own empire. It seems I am a very popular commodity." The raw truth of her words hit him like a physical blow. He had seen this as a clinical operation, never truly considering the human cost for her until this moment. And he saw something else in her eyes, a terrifyingly sharp intelligence. He made a decision. The old plan was dead. A new one had to be forged right now. "Your father is deeper in this than you can imagine," Kalo said, his tone shifting. "He's taken a lot of money. He's about to hand over the final piece of data they need to sabotage the Ares project permanently." "When?" "At the Okoro Legacy Gala, in 3 days. He thinks he's announcing a partnership for his logistics company. In reality, he's delivering my entire future into their hands." Xena processed this, her expression unreadable. She walked to the window, her back to him. The silence stretched. Kalo waited. He had lost control. Finally, she turned. The look on her face was not of a victim. It was of a new CEO taking charge. "All right," she announced. "Here is what is going to happen." He listened, stunned, as she laid out her terms. "You will not just expose him," she stated. "A quiet arrest is not justice. It's damage control for your company. I will not allow my family's name to be dragged through the mud while you walk away clean." "What do you want?" he asked. "I want a reckoning," she said, her eyes burning with a cold fire. "Public. Spectacular. At the gala. I want every person who ever looked down on me to watch the great house of Okoro crumble." She took a step closer. "You will get your justice, Kalo, but on my terms, and I will be the one to deliver the final blow." He saw it then. This was no longer his mission. It was hers. She was telling him how he was going to help her. "You will provide the evidence," she commanded. "Recordings, bank transfers, everything. I will orchestrate the timing. I know the gala's schedule, the exact moment my father is at his most vulnerable." This was a hostile takeover of his own operation. It was breathtaking, and it was his only option. "And what about us?" he asked, the question escaping before he could stop it. Xena looked at him, and for the first time a flicker of uncertainty crossed her face. The architect faltered. "One war at a time," she said, her voice barely audible. "First, we burn them to the ground." The Okoro Legacy Gala was a symphony of denial. Crystal glasses clinked, champagne flowed, and the air buzzed with the forced laughter of Lagos high society. Adana Okoro drifted through the crowd, a queen in her court, her smile a perfect polished weapon. No one could know the empire was built on a sinkhole. Chief Emeka Okoro stood near the stage, sweating in his tailored suit and fiddling with his gold cufflinks. He was waiting for his business partner, the final piece of his disastrous puzzle. Xena watched from the shadows near a service entrance. She wore a simple, elegant black dress, an armor of her own making. Beside her, Kalo stood, no longer Eve, but the formidable CEO of Solara Innovations. He was a silent, coiled spring. "He's looking for his contact," Kalo murmured, his eyes fixed on the chief. "He's about to make the transfer." "Let him," Xena replied, her voice calm. "Let him walk to the edge of the cliff himself." On cue, the MC tapped the microphone. "And now a few words from our host, a true titan of industry, Chief Emeka Okoro." A polite smattering of applause followed the man as he walked to the podium. He beamed, soaking in the attention. This was the moment that would save him. "My friends, colleagues," he began. "Tonight we celebrate legacy, but we also look to the future. Okoro College is proud to announce a bold new partnership." This was the signal. From the main entrance, a figure strode into the ballroom, moving with an aura of absolute power that silenced conversations. The MC faltered, checking his notes. "Ladies and gentlemen," he stammered. "An unexpected but most welcome guest. Please welcome the CEO of Solara Innovations, Mr. Kalo Mbadu." A wave of shock rippled through the room. Chief Okoro froze at the podium, his face turning a sickly gray. This was not his contact. This was the man he was betraying. Kalo walked directly to the stage and took the microphone. "Thank you, Chief," he said, his voice dangerously smooth. "I believe you are about to announce a partnership. I'm very interested to hear about it, especially since your new partners have been paying you quite handsomely for my company's secrets." Gasps erupted. Adana's smile finally cracked, her hand flying to her throat. "This is a misunderstanding," the chief stammered. "Is it?" Kalo held up his phone. He pressed a single button. Chief Okoro's whining, desperate voice filled the ballroom from the powerful speakers. I need more capital now, not after the announcement. A second, colder voice replied. You'll get your money when we get the final specs for the Ares turbine. Deliver them at the gala as planned. The recording ended. The silence that followed was absolute. Adana's eyes rolled back and she crumpled to the marble floor in a silent faint. But the chaos was just beginning. Neka shoved her way to the front, her phone held high on Instagram Live. It's fake news, she shrieked. My father is a great man. You're all just haters. Smash that like button if you support my family. The corporate takedown had devolved into a trashy reality show. Security guards loyal to the chief began moving toward the stage, and then Xena moved. She walked out of the shadows, past the gawking guests, past her screaming adoptive sister, and up the steps. She did not rush. She moved with the calm, deliberate certainty of a woman who owned the room. She took the microphone from Kalo's hand. He let her. This was her stage now. The entire hall fell silent. Even Neka stopped screaming. Xena looked out at the sea of shocked faces. She looked directly at her father, who was trembling, broken. She didn't shout. She didn't cry. She delivered the final killing blow with 5 simple words. It's all true. I have the proof. Her voice, clear and steady, cut through the noise like a guillotine. It was not an accusation. It was a verdict. The story didn't end there. It concluded hours later in the stark, minimalist penthouse that was Kalo's real home. The city lights of Lagos spread out below them, a galaxy of indifferent stars. The adrenaline was gone. The victory felt like ashes. He had won. She had won. He had destroyed her family. She had helped him do it. Kalo stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, his tie loosened. He looked at Xena, who was standing in the middle of the vast living room, her arms wrapped around herself. The space between them was a chasm. What now? He asked, his voice a whisper. Xena didn't look at him. She looked out at the sprawling city. Her past was a pile of rubble. Her future a blank, terrifying blueprint. She finally turned to face him, the architect looking at the man who had been both her captor and her liberator. Their relationship was a structure built on a foundation of lies, and they had just detonated it. I don't know, she said. The words hung in the silent, expensive air, an admission of a truth more complex than any corporate secret. They had won the battle, but the war for what came next had only just begun.